Hey everybody, John Wagnon here with Dev Central. We're coming to you with another Lightboard lesson video. And today we're back in the OWASP Top 10. And this is the number 9 out of 10 security risks out there on the list. And this list, or this security risk is called using components with known vulnerabilities. So I guess the easy thing to say, and many people would maybe think, well, hey, just don't use components in your web application that have known vulnerabilities, right? Well, it's easier said than done. Typically, when you build out your web application, you're going to pick and choose different things that you need to create that web application, and inevitably, something is going to have a vulnerability that is known. So I'll just draw a couple of things up here. We'll talk through kind of this situation and how to guard against it. So let's say you have your awesome web application. So here's your web app out here that everyone loves, and they visit it all the time, and you get 1 million hits a day or whatever. So whenever you build this thing, it has some fundamental components to it, right? So maybe you have a web server, of course, right? Maybe you have it's an R. Maybe you have I'll put a DB, like a database server. And let's say this web server, let's say you choose to use Apache. That's a pretty common one. Let's say for database, you use Oracle. That's another pretty common one. Let's say that because you're all interested in security, you want to make sure that the clients that access your web application come in encrypted. So we're going to use TLS SSL capabilities. So that's so your web address is going to be HTTPS, webapp.com kind of thing. Alrighty, so that's just a very basic list, of course, but you can start to understand that there's a lot of different components that go into your web application. I went out there and looked recently and checked out, like say on the Apache web server, are Apache web servers, do they have any known vulnerabilities on them? There's a pretty common one out there that's called the Struts. I'm just going to kind of start writing all this across here. So there's a Struts vulnerability that's unique to the Apache web server. It's based on based on what version you have. An Apache web server could be vulnerable to this Struts vulnerability. Another one, say for Oracle, there's a Java VM Oracle database server known vulnerability out there. And by the way, there are many, many, many known vulnerabilities that I could list here, unique to Apache or Oracle or any number of components that you might use. For TLS SSL, there's a pretty common one back in April of 2014 called Heartbleed. And if you did not configure your TLS SSL configuration correctly, you may be vulnerable to what's called Heartbleed, and you guys probably remember that one. Interestingly, there's a website called Shodan, and it does a scan of all these internet websites, web applications, whatever. I did one literally today and checked to see, is anyone still vulnerable? I mean, this thing's been out there for a number of years now. Is anyone still vulnerable to Heartbleed? And the list that I came up with today, there was almost 120,000 web applications still vulnerable to Heartbleed today. So just because it's an old one out there and it's like, you may think, hey, that one's kind of gone and we're not worried about that one anymore. The truth is that many, web applications may still be vulnerable, these legacy applications or whatever. All right, so you start to get the idea that as you build your web application, you're going to probably be forced into a situation where you have to use components that have known vulnerabilities. There's kind of some good and bad with that. The good part of the known vulnerabilities is we do know about them, so we know what to protect and fix and all that stuff. The bad part about it is we do know about them. And so if we know about them, then the bad guys know about them, and they know to go and exploit those. So let's say, for example, you've got a web application using these different things, and for one reason or another, the attacker bad guy is going to say, hey, I know that you're using an Apache web server. Maybe you're disclosing too much information or that kind of thing. And they understand that the version that you're using. And then they can go and do a Google search for, hey, how can I exploit this Apache web server on that version? They find out that you're vulnerable to this Struts vulnerability. And then they can know exactly what to go after. So again, the good part is if you use a vulnerable version of this, you'll know what to protect for. But if you use a vulnerable version, then the attacker knows what to attack for, kind of thing. So he knows the exact attack space, as it were. All right, so that's the situation, components with known vulnerabilities. A couple of things to consider here is in terms of guarding against this is I'm going to say continuous inventory of your clients and servers. So I'll just put inventory up here. Inventory, and I'll put clients and servers. All right, so, which by the way, in your business, from a business perspective, you've got a lot of clients out there too that may be vulnerable with various components. So it may not just be web servers that we're talking about here. So from a business perspective, from a total ownership perspective, you need to constantly be committed to inventorying your clients and your servers that you own or that you control, and then that way you can know, what's out there, what to look for, all of that. So do a continuous inventory, as it were, and then I'm going to say download components from trusted sources or official sources. So I'll just put downloads. I'll just put downloads for now. But basically the idea here is if you are going to download some software, you're not necessarily going to walk down the street and buy it at the countertop or whatever with the person standing there. Maybe you are, but likely you're going to download the software, right? So when you download this software, maybe it's Apache or Oracle or whatever it is, then make sure you get it from a proper official channel. You may even want to make sure that it's digitally signed to ensure that it's coming from a reputable source. If you're downloading a bunch of stuff off of some crazy websites that you don't even know where they're coming from, then then that opens up the chance that your downloads, your software may be, maybe full of holes, or it may not be exactly what you wanted it to be. So that could be problematic. So make sure you download from the right places. I'm just going to put plan over here. Plan for things like monitoring. I'll put monitor. I'm going to put patch. We're going to say config. Those types of things. So have a plan in place to say, hey, I know what my components are that make up the entirety of my web application, and I'm going to monitor those components. I'm going to patch those components. So as a patch comes out from the, let's say again Apache, Apache releases a patch to handle this struts problem. So we need to patch that. We need to configure our clients and servers properly, and we need to stay on top of that. But all of this goes back to, let me have a plan and make sure that I do things according to the plan that I have in place. All right, so with all of this, like I said, I know that it's inevitable that you're going to put components in your web application that have known vulnerabilities, so it's really hard to get around that. So what we need to do is we need to come down here and just make sure that we're constantly checking these things. A couple of things that I'll finish up with are some databases. One is called the CVE, and then another one is the NVD. All right, the CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exploits, and then the NVD is the National Vulnerability Database. So I'll put links to these, with this video. But you can go and you can check. Hey, these are the components of my web application. Let me check against these two databases, as it were, to see if there's any vulnerabilities that are known with the components that I have. So again, number 9 on the list of the top 10 OWASP using components with known vulnerabilities. It's an inevitable thing. So while there are vulnerabilities out there, we can still take steps to mitigate those and ensure that we stay on top of this as much as possible. So thanks for watching this Lightboard lesson video. Hey, if you like this video, you can click subscribe right here on this DC ball, and we'll see you guys out there in the community.